What if everything you've ever been told about life's ultimate purpose, about what comes after, or about the nature of reality itself, was profoundly wrong? What if the path to true fulfillment lay not in abstract spiritual quests, but in the immediate, tangible pleasures of this very moment, this single breath? Welcome to Stoic Pyre. Today, we're diving into a philosophy so radical, so provocative, that it was largely erased from history, demonized, and misunderstood. We're talking about Charvaka, an ancient Indian school of thought that championed materialism, hedonism, and a fierce skepticism, long before similar ideas emerged in the West. Join us as we uncover the audacious claims of a philosophy that urged us to live fully, for this life is all there is. At the heart of Charvaka philosophy lies a startlingly simple yet profound assertion. Our present life, this world right here, right now, is the only reality that matters. Forget about moksha, nirvana, or any other worldly objectives that promise rewards in a distant future or a different realm. The Charvaka thinkers believed that these abstract concepts were dangerous distractions, pulling us away from the one true opportunity for happiness we are ever guaranteed. They argued that our ultimate goal, the very essence of human endeavor, should be to make this present life beautiful, fulfilling, and utterly vibrant, embracing every sensation and experience it offers. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a foundational principle, a call to ground ourselves firmly in the material world, appreciating its wonders and maximizing our experience of joy within its boundaries. It asks us to consider what we truly value, if this moment is our only certainty, compelling us to invest fully in our immediate surroundings and relationships, rather than deferring happiness for an ethereal promise. The emphasis is on immediate, tangible well-being, challenging millennia of spiritual teachings that often prioritize detachment and future salvation over present contentment. It's a stark contrast to nearly every other major philosophical and religious tradition that flourished in ancient India, asserting that the spiritual realm is a figment and true living occurs only in the here and now. This perspective liberates us from the burden of eternal consequences, focusing all our energy on crafting a meaningful and pleasurable earthly existence. Building on that foundation, Charvaka philosophy famously advocated for the active, unapologetic pursuit of pleasure. And not just any pleasure, but sensual, earthly delight in all its forms. They famously proclaimed, and this is a central tenet often cited, Yavat jivet sukham jivet, runam kritva grtam pibet. This translates to something like, as long as one lives, one should live happily. One should drink ghee, even if one has to incur debt. It's a striking endorsement of living joyfully, without undue worry about future financial burdens or moralistic judgments about debt. For the Charvakas, this earthly existence is the only opportunity for happiness we will ever have. To deny ourselves pleasure, to postpone joy for some uncertain spiritual gain, was seen as foolish, even tragic, a waste of our finite time. They challenged the prevailing ascetic traditions, asking why one would willingly forsake the tangible joys of the present, a delicious meal, a beautiful song, a loving embrace, for the mere promise of an intangible future. This wasn't necessarily a call to mindless excess, but a rational choice. If pleasure is the only verifiable good, then maximizing it becomes the most logical course of action. They recognized that life is inherently filled with both pleasure and pain, but they urged adherents to seek out and savor the pleasures diligently, It's a philosophy that demands immediate gratification and mindful enjoyment, urging us to embrace life's bounty with open arms right now, understanding that there's no spiritual penalty for doing so. Is this a reckless embrace of raw hedonism, a dangerous path toward societal decay, or a profoundly honest acceptance of our finite existence that urges us to truly live? One of Charvaka's most revolutionary and controversial claims directly challenged the prevailing spiritual paradigm of ancient India, the absolute denial of rebirth or any continuation of existence after the body's destruction. For them, when the body dies, that's it. The soul, if it even existed as a separate entity, ceased to be. There was no karmic cycle, no transmigration of souls, no soul journeying to other realms or facing judgment. This single life, from birth to cremation, constituted the entirety of human experience, making every single moment precious beyond measure. This perspective radically reshaped their ethical framework. If there's no spiritual scoreboard, no cosmic ledger tallying your good and bad deeds for future lives, then the motivation for action shifts entirely. It eliminates the fear of future punishment or the hope of future reward in an afterlife, compelling individuals to find meaning and satisfaction within the confines of their mortal journey. It's a stark, almost brutal confrontation with mortality, urging us to make every moment count, because there are no second chances, no do-overs in another existence, no other opportunities to experience joy or sorrow. This rejection of rebirth stood in direct opposition to almost every other major Indian philosophical school, including Buddhism, Jainism, and the various Orthodox Hindu schools, demanding an entirely different ethical calculus based purely on the here and now, rather than on eternal consequences. It implies a fierce self-reliance for meaning and morality. Given their rejection of rebirth and other worldly goals, it's no surprise that Charvaka thinkers viewed ascetic practices and religious rituals with extreme skepticism, often outright dismissal. They saw them as utterly futile, even detrimental to human well-being. Why starve yourself, endure discomfort, or perform elaborate ceremonies and sacrifices if there are no heaven, no liberation, and no gods to appease? The Charvakas argued that these practices were not only useless in achieving any spiritual goal, but they actively diminished the joy and pleasure available in this one precious life. They questioned the very premise of suffering now for a reward later that might never come, emphasizing the tangible pain and loss of immediate happiness inflicted by such self-denial. For them, the only rewards were those experienced directly through the senses, making any renunciation for unseen benefits illogical and irrational. They critiqued the priests who promoted these rituals, suggesting they were often self-serving, designed to extract wealth and maintain power by preying on people's fear of the unknown and their desire for salvation. The Charvaka perspective encouraged a liberation from these societal and religious pressures, advocating for a life unburdened by empty rites and self-imposed suffering, thereby freeing up time and resources for genuine worldly enjoyment and fulfillment. A world without spiritual consequence or eternal judgment. Is that absolute, unfettered freedom, or a terrifying, meaningless void that we must fill ourselves? The Charvaka's radical worldview wasn't just about ethics. It was deeply rooted in their epistemology, their theory of knowledge. They asserted that direct perception, what they called pratyaksa, is the only reliable source of knowledge. If you can see it, touch it, hear it, taste it, or smell it, then it's real and knowable. All other means of acquiring knowledge, such as inference, anumana, or testimony, shabda, especially scriptural testimony like the Vedas, were deemed invalid for establishing truths about unobservable phenomena. You can't directly perceive heaven, hell, karma, a transcendent God, or a separate eternal soul. Therefore, their existence cannot be reliably asserted. This uncompromising empiricism made them reject vast swathes of traditional wisdom and religious dogma. They argued that inference, while useful in daily life, is inherently fallible and cannot provide certainty about things beyond direct experience. Similarly, testimony, even from revered scriptures, is only as reliable as its human source, which can be prone to error, bias, or even deliberate deception. For the Charvakas, anything beyond the immediate sensory experience was mere speculation, superstition, or potentially manipulation. It's a philosophy that demands empirical evidence for every claim, a rigorous approach that stands as a testament to their commitment to reason and observable reality, even when it led to unpopular conclusions that challenged the very foundations of their society. This epistemological stance underpinned their entire materialist and hedonistic framework, asserting that only what is demonstrably real through the senses can be the basis for a rational life. This epistemological skepticism leads directly to Charvaka's identity as a Nastika school, a term often translated as atheist or heterodox, meaning not believing or rejecting authority. They fundamentally rejected the scriptural authority of the Vedas, viewing their pronouncements as unreliable, speculative, and even manipulative. Unlike other Indian philosophies that sought to interpret or reinterpret Vedic teachings, or even subtly critique them from within, Charvaka simply dismissed them entirely. They believed the Vedas were human creations, sometimes even outright deceptions perpetrated by priests to maintain power, status, and extract wealth from the populace. For the Charvakas, any knowledge that couldn't be verified through direct perception, any claim that relied solely on ancient texts or the word of authority figures, was to be discarded as unfounded. This made them truly revolutionary, tearing down the very pillars of religious and philosophical establishment in ancient India, directly challenging the Brahmins and the social hierarchy they represented. They were not just questioning, but actively denying the sacred cows of their time, demanding a reevaluation of how truth itself was determined and what legitimate role, if any, tradition played in that quest. This radical rejection of scriptural authority made them a direct threat to the established order, contributing to their marginalization and the eventual suppression of their original texts, leaving us to piece together their teachings primarily through the critiques of their opponents. What if you only truly trusted what your direct senses told you and nothing else? How would your perception of the world and your place in it fundamentally shift? The Charvaka worldview was profoundly materialistic, defining existence entirely through the physical. They posited that the universe is composed solely of the four fundamental material elements: earth, water, fire, and air, or sometimes space, ether, was explicitly excluded. There was no fifth element, no ethereal ether or spiritual substance, and certainly no transcendent creator God or divine intervention. Everything, including consciousness itself, arose from the combination and interaction of these material elements. This was a radical concept for its time, directly challenging the prevalent belief in an eternal spiritual soul. Consciousness, to the Charvakas, was not a separate immortal soul inhabiting the body. It was an emergent property, much like the intoxicating power of alcohol emerges from the fermentation of grains and molasses, even though no single grain or ingredient possesses that property individually. Just as the intoxicating power vanishes when the alcohol is consumed or evaporates, consciousness, they argued, appears with the formation of a living body and disappears completely with its destruction. When the body perishes, so does the mind, the self, and all sensation and thought. This materialist reductionism stripped away all spiritual baggage, leaving behind a universe that was entirely self-sufficient, governed by natural laws, and devoid of any supernatural intervention or meaning beyond what we ourselves create within our brief material existence. There is no spirit to liberate, no soul to save, only the material body and its temporary manifestation of awareness. Given the absence of rebirth, the singularity of life, and the material nature of consciousness, Charvaka philosophy logically concluded that indulging in sensual pleasures, including intoxicants, was not just permissible, but a rational way to maximize happiness. If this life is your only shot, why hold back? Why deny yourself the profound joys of taste, touch, sight, sound, and smell? The Charvakas were not advocating for mindless or reckless self-destruction, but rather for a considered approach to pleasure, understanding that it was the only verifiable source of happiness, a core component of sukha, or well-being. They saw intoxicants, when used appropriately, not as a moral failing but as a means to enhance sensory experience and elevate mood, a valid tool in the quest for joy within the finite limits of human existence. This wasn't a call to nihilistic excess, but a pragmatic recognition that since there were no spiritual consequences beyond this life, the only consequence that truly mattered was the felt experience of pleasure or pain in this life. While they emphasized pleasure, it's inferred they also understood the importance of social bonds and avoiding excessive harm, as these would diminish overall happiness in this life. It encouraged a life lived vibrantly, intensely, and unapologetically, fully engaging with all the sensory richness the material world had to offer before it inevitably faded into nothingness. This stands as a powerful counter-narrative to centuries of spiritual teachings that often equate pleasure with sin or distraction. If pleasure is the only verifiable good, does that make it the ultimate path to a truly meaningful life? And what are the inherent limits to such a pursuit? The Charvaka philosophy, with its radical materialism and hedonistic leanings, was understandably met with fierce opposition and often misrepresentation throughout history. Critics, predominantly from Orthodox Hindu and other Astika schools, labeled them as amoral, gluttonous, and destructive to social order, often portraying them as crude materialists with no regard for ethics. Yet, it's important to understand that Charvaka wasn't necessarily about crude indulgence without thought. It was a philosophy that forced a radical reevaluation of purpose, challenging dogmas that promised future rewards while demanding present sacrifices. Its legacy, though often relegated to footnotes or presented in a highly critical light by opposing schools, reminds us of the profound diversity of thought in ancient India and, indeed, the human capacity for independent reasoning, It was a powerful voice for skepticism, for empiricism, and for the undeniable value of the present moment, advocating for a human-centered morality rather than a divinely dictated one. Its very existence and the strenuous efforts made by other schools to refute and suppress its ideas speak volumes about its revolutionary impact and the threat it posed to established beliefs. It compels us to ask, are we truly living for this life, embracing its full spectrum of experiences, or are we constantly deferring joy for a promise that may never materialize? What are we missing by constantly looking beyond the tangible, the immediate, the verifiable? Charvaka philosophy, a forgotten titan of ancient thought, offers a stark yet liberating perspective. It strips away spiritual dogma, demanding that we confront our mortality and find meaning and joy in the tangible, sensual reality of this one precious life. No afterlife, no karma, just us and the present moment. It's a call to live fully, to embrace pleasure, and to question everything that cannot be directly perceived through our senses. What do you make of the Charvaka challenge? Is it a dangerous philosophy or a refreshing dose of reality that allows us to find genuine happiness? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey into radical thought resonated with you, please like this video. Subscribe to Stoic Pyre for more philosophical explorations, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep living.